In the next lab, we want to solve with this broken user authentication vulnerability. It refers to a situation where the authentication mechanism used by an application or API is not properly implemented or can be bypassed by an attacker. This vulnerability can allow an attacker to access sensitive data, perform unauthorized action, or take control of the system. In this particular API, user authentication mechanism is broken, allowing attackers to bypass the authentication checks and gain unauthorized access to the system. This can happen due to a number of reasons, including weak passwords, lack of encryption, and poor session management. The impact of this vulnerability can be severe, as it can allow attackers to gain to sensitive data or perform unauthorized actions. For example, an attacker could gain access to user account information, financial data, or other sensitive data. They could also modify or delete data, perform actions on behalf of the user, or take control of the system. To address this vulnerability, it is recommended that the following steps be taken. Implement proper authentication checks. The API should implement proper authentication checks to ensure that only authorized user can access the system. This can include strong password policies, encryption of user data, and session management. Use multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication can add an additional layer of security to the authentication process, making it more difficult for attackers to gain unauthorized access. Monitor and log all authentication attempts. Monitoring and logging all authentication attempts can help detect and respond to any suspicious activity, such as repeated failed login attempts or unusual patterns of activity. Conduct regular security audits. Regular security audits can help identify vulnerabilities and ensure that the system is secure. This can include vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, and code review. The broken user authentication vulnerability identified in this API can have severe consequences for the security of the system and its users. It is important that the recommendation outlined in this report be followed to address the vulnerability and ensure the security of the system. Or in this lab here we have an application. CoinPay is an online cryptocurrency exchange platform that allow merchants, consumer and traders to buy, sell and store digital cryptocurrency. Data breach. Following a recent cyber attack against a well-known ISP, a group of hackers has published sampled a compromised user data on Rapid Forum, an online forum website used by cyber criminals to store and share stolen credit card data, pirated movie, and password dumps. So Bob, a professional cyber criminal, regularly monitors sites like Rabbit forums, looking for password dumps, leaked credit card data, and other sensitive data. As Bob, I will go ahead and access the Rabbit forum link. Password dump. Bob eyeballs the password dump and identifies an email address belonging to a Coinbase customer, Alice. Since the above email and credential may still be valid, Bob attempts to access Alice's Coinbase account using her lead credential. Credential stuffing. Bob proceeds with accessing the Coinpay portal below to attempt a credential stuffing attack against Alice's Coinpay account. So note, what is a credential stuffing here? Credential stuffing is a technique in which the credential obtained from a data breach on one service are used to attempt to log in to another unrelated services. So as Bob, I will go ahead and load Coinpay website in my browser. Now I try to log in. So So I attempt to log into Alice's CoinPay account with the stolen credentials below. Two-factor authentication. Upon submitting Alice's stolen credential, Bob is presented with a two-factor authentication prompt, preventing him from accessing Alice's CoinPay account. However, given the financial upside from hacking into Alice's account, Bob is motivated to find a new way to bypass CoinSpay two-factor authentication. Bob begins testing CoinSpay two-factor authentication functionality by submitting an arbitrary verification token below to see how it communicates with the backend server. Now we have to intercept the request. To understand how CoinSpay two-factor authentication functionality communicates with the backend server, Bob intercepts the HTTP request generated by his browser using an application web proxy. So it's a web proxy. Web proxy, also known as HTTP proxy, is a software debugging tool that enables web developers to view and modify raw HTTP and HTTPS traffic between the machine and the remote web application. This may include HTTP, HTTPS request and response data, request, parameters, headers, etc. So upon clicking the submit button, Bob's browser generate a post request to Coinbase backend API endpoint slash API slash validate code, passing his token value 2000 via the code parameter. After analyzing the response, so the HTTP response intercepted by Bob's web proxy for additional parameters or response variables sent by the remote server. Analyzing the HTTP response, the server returns the parameter field valid set to false, indicating that Bob's submitted token value 2000 is invalid. However, notice that no additional parameter or warning message returned by the server. An example, the number of maximum tries a user is allowed to submit a token. Maybe more mob can brute force Coinbase two-factor authentication API to guess the token value. The attack script. To test whether the coinspace slash API slash valid code endpoint is vulnerable to a brute force attack, Bobs creates a Python script bruteforce.py that runs the curl command against coinspace authentication API endpoint and submits a 4-digit token for verification. Should the token value not match, the script will iterate the token value by 1 and try again, repeating until a match is found. Interesting. By submitting multiple token value to Coinbase slash API slash validate code remote endpoint, Bob's bruteforce.py script has successfully identified a valid token 2047, which he can now use to access Alice's account. So try logging in again. Having potentially identified the connect two-factor token value for Alice's Coinbase account, Bob attempts to log in using the brute force verification token below. Two-factor authentication bypassed. Success. By simply brute forcing every possible token value, Bob has successfully managed to bypass Coinspay two-step verification and further managed to access the Coinpay account with the Alice's stolen credential. Note: The attack performed by Bob is called a brute force attack, which falls under the broken user authentication category of OAuth's top 10 risks. So broken user authentication refers to weakness in authentication mechanism and associated application workflows, which can include authentication that does not follow securities and best practices, authentication susceptible to brute force attacks and credential stuffing, lack of access token validation, etc. So let's analyze the vulnerable code. To understand the root cause of the brute force against Coinspace/API/validate code endpoint, let's take a look at the source code used for validating the two-factor authentication. The validate code function is used to validate the two-factor verification token. If the token is correct, the method sets the authentication session. It also responds with a flag indicating whether the provided token was correct. However, notice that validate code function method does not have any limitation on the amount of possible code entry attempts. This allows Bob to test various code combinations, opening the API endpoint to a possible brute force attack. Mitigation. There are many methods to stop or prevent brute force attacks depending on the feature and business use case within the application. For example, the coin space scenario, a long-term fix to prevent token-based brute force attack would be to increase the token length from 4 characters to a minimum of 8, thereby increasing the time it takes to attempt every possible token combination. Add progressive delay or rate limit the attempt to submit a new token. Add CAPTCHA to log in, registration, and two-factor authentication forms. So let's see how the above best practices particularly. In this modified code example, we'll limit the number of tries of verification code entry available for user. After the third incorrect attempt, the code is updated, preventing the user from brute forcing the correct code value.